She thought it was just another cold evening when she saw the little fur ball curled under her porch swing. With its tiny paws, matted fur, and pitiful meow, it looked like a typical stray kitten. Out of compassion, she scooped it up and took it inside, wrapped it in an old towel, set out some milk, and posted a picture on social media with the caption, "Found stray kitten, anyone missing this little guy?" But by sunrise, the kitten wasn't purring anymore, it was growling. What she thought was a rescue, turned into a wild, life-altering encounter. The quiet life at forest's edge. Sometimes, what you think is lost, is simply wild. The late afternoon sun spilled amber light over the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the treetops in fiery reds and golds. In the quiet town of Asheville, North Carolina, where the suburbs blur into forest, Lena Moore's cabin stood tucked between towering maples and whispering pines. The scent of damp leaves and wood smoke drifted through the crisp October air. Lena, 29, had chosen this life. Away from the noise, away from the crowds, and far from the expectations that once chased her in the city. A freelance illustrator, she worked from home, sketching children's books and dreamscapes for indie publishers. Her skin was fair, freckles scattered across her cheeks like stardust. She wore her auburn hair loose and messy, often pulled into a bun with a pencil jammed through it. Most days she lived in soft flannel and wool socks, moving from sketchpad to teapot with a kind of quiet rhythm. The cabin was modest, 2 bedrooms, cedar shingles, wide windows. What made it special was the backyard, which opened directly into Pisgah National Forest. Lena had always loved animals, and nature gave her company when people could not. Her only companion now was Jasper, a gray-striped tabby with a limp from an old injury and the silent wisdom of a cat who'd seen too much. It was a Thursday when it all began, the kind of day that felt too ordinary to matter. Lena was finishing an illustration of a fox in a snowstorm when she realized the trash hadn't gone out. With a sigh, she slipped into her boots, grabbed the bin, and pushed open the screen door. The air smelled like moss and smoke and something else, something she couldn't place. She stepped onto the porch and froze. A soft sound, not quite a meow, more like a whimper, drifted up from under the porch swing. She tilted her head. "Jasper," she called out, but the old cat was still curled up inside on the radiator. There it was again. A broken, rasping mule. Lena set down the trash and crouched. Her knees pressed against the wood planks as she peered under the porch. Huddled in the corner, curled against the foundation bricks, was a kitten. Or, something like one. It was tiny, maybe no more than a foot long. Its fur was sandy gray, dappled with dark spots. Its ears were oversized, ending in black tufts. And those eyes, they glowed amber in the fading light, wide and wild. "Oh, baby," Lena whispered. "You're freezing." Without thinking, she reached slowly beneath the swing, her breath fogging in the chill. The creature flinched but didn't run. She wrapped it in an old dish towel and cradled it to her chest. The animal was shivering, its body trembling in waves. Jasper would not be happy, but her instinct screamed louder than logic. "Let's get you warm," Lena murmured. As the screen door shut behind them, the wind stirred the leaves, and in the shadows, something watched from the edge of the trees. That night, as the fire crackled in the hearth and Lena nursed the strange kitten with a bottle of warm milk, she had no idea she was sheltering a wild predator. And what came next would change her life forever. The kitten named Benny. Not every wild thing wants to stay wild, at least, not at first. Inside the soft amber glow of her living room, Lena gently lowered the trembling bundle into a makeshift nest made from an old fleece hoodie. The creature sniffled, curled tighter into itself, and let out the faintest chirping sound, something between a purr and a growl. She sat cross-legged beside it on the floor, watching its every move with quiet fascination. The towel had slipped slightly, revealing more of its unusual markings, dusky rosette stretching down the spine, a short tail tipped in black, and fur far too thick for a typical house kitten. Still, Lena's heart swelled with that warm ache reserved only for vulnerable things. She reached for her phone and snapped a picture. "Meet Benny," she whispered. She didn't know where the name came from. It just felt right. The post went up on her town's Facebook group with the caption, "Found this little one under my porch tonight. Looks like someone's Bengal mix. Friendly but nervous. Please DM if he's yours." Within minutes, the comments flooded in. "That doesn't look like a Bengal. Are you sure that's a house cat? I work with rescues, I think that might be something wild." Lena scrolled through them, her brow furrowing. She leaned in to get a closer look at the kitten. Benny was now asleep, tiny chest rising and falling in rhythmic pulses. His oversized paws twitched in his dreams. The tufts on his ears, jet black and feathered, flicked with each shift in air. She had seen Bengals before. They had a certain domesticated shine to them, a sleekness bred for beauty and companionship. But this? This was something else entirely. Still, the animal hadn't hissed. Hadn't tried to bite. It had simply surrendered. From the kitchen counter, Jasper watched with narrowed green eyes and a tail flicking in agitation. He hadn't made a sound, but Lena knew that look. The old cat was suspicious, maybe even scared. "You're just jealous," Lena teased, trying to inject lightness into her voice. Jasper didn't blink. That night, Lena set Benny up in a box near the radiator, padded with old scarves and a heating pad set to low. She left out a shallow dish of goat milk and a small plate with shredded turkey from the fridge. Benny didn't eat until midnight, when the house was silent. Lena, half asleep on the couch, opened one eye just in time to see him wobble toward the dish and sniff. He lapped up the milk with urgency, eyes wide and darting between gulps. A soft sound came from outside, maybe wind, maybe something else. Benny froze. Then, he looked straight at Lena. Their eyes met. And for a moment, the house didn't feel like a house. It felt like a den. "Okay," she whispered. "You're safe now." But far beyond the windows, just at the edge of the woods, yellow eyes blinked once, and disappeared. In the days that followed, Lena would learn more about Benny, and about herself, than she ever imagined. Because the bond between them was about to be tested in ways neither of them could predict. Strange behaviors and growing doubts. It's easy to call something yours, until it begins to show you what it truly is. By the second day, the quiet little house that once smelled like tea leaves and old books now carried the sharp tang of raw meat and pine needles. Benny had begun exploring, not like a kitten, but like something far more ancient, primal, and alert. At first, Lena found his quirks endearing. He was clumsy yet curious, often pawing at shadows or scaling the couch only to flop dramatically on the cushions. But there was something off. Something that didn't quite belong. He didn't meow. He chirped, short, staccato bursts, often accompanied by guttural growls when startled. His pupils stayed wide, even in daylight, and his ears rotated independently, always listening, always calculating. Jasper, once the ruler of the house, now avoided entire rooms. He stopped sleeping in his favorite sunspots. The top of the bookshelf became his new refuge. Any time Benny approached, Jasper would hiss, eyes dilated, body tense. Lena tried to laugh it off. "Jazz, he's just a baby," she said, placing another dish of shredded chicken beside Benny's now empty water bowl. But Benny's response wasn't kitten-like gratitude, it was something more predatory. He stalked his food, pawed at it like prey, and ate with a deep, rumbling purr that felt more like possession than satisfaction. The internet offered little comfort. After her Facebook post, a few users sent private messages suggesting that Benny might not be a domestic cat at all. One woman from a local wildlife rehab center wrote, "Ma'am, I don't mean to alarm you, but that looks an awful lot like a bobcat kitten. You should be very careful. Lena stared at the message for several minutes, rereading it over and over. A bobcat? She glanced across the room, where Benny was currently batting at a piece of newspaper. He looked so small. So harmless. His spotted fur rippled with every playful swipe. But then he froze, locked eyes with her, and crouched, that same unnerving hunter's posture she'd seen in nature documentaries. No, Lena muttered aloud. He's just different. That's all. But the evidence was stacking up. That night, as she reached down to pick him up, Benny growled. Not a hiss, not the high-pitched whine of discomfort, but a deep, warning growl that came from his chest like thunder rolling in low clouds. It stopped Lena cold. Okay, she whispered, pulling back her hands. Okay, buddy. No problem. She didn't try again. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Benny curled into a tight ball at the edge of the blanket, twitching in his dreams, teeth bared. Jasper didn't come into the bedroom at all. At 3:14 a.m., a loud crash jolted Lena awake. She rushed into the living room to find her bookshelf toppled, books scattered everywhere, and a streak of shredded paper trailing to the hallway. Benny stood in the middle of the chaos, chest heaving, tail erect. In his jaws was one of Jasper's old toy mice. It wasn't a game. It was a kill. Lena knelt slowly, her heart pounding. Benny stared at her, not with shame or confusion, but with something else entirely. Possession. Confidence. Wildness. She backed away and whispered, "What are you?" That question would lead her straight to the vet's office, and to an answer she wasn't ready for. Because what she had mistaken for a rescue was something that had never been meant to live indoors. The truth at Blue Ridge Animal Hospital. The wild doesn't ask to be tamed, it just waits to be recognized. By the third morning, Lena's arms bore the soft evidence of her mistake, tiny scratches crisscrossing her forearms, souvenirs from every attempted cuddle or feeding. Benny wasn't aggressive, at least, not in the way people think of wild things, but he was alert, reactive, and becoming stronger by the hour. When he leapt from the top of the fridge and landed soundlessly, it felt less like a pet's mischief and more like a predator testing its hunting ground. That was when Lena made the call. "Hi, yes. I need to schedule a checkup. I found a stray kitten. But I think it's not what I thought it was." Dr. Henry Cooper had been Asheville's trusted vet for over 3 decades. His small practice, Blue Ridge Animal Hospital, sat off a winding country road lined with sugar maples and gravel turn-ins. Known for his gentle touch and his years volunteering with wildlife rescue, he had seen everything from half-frozen raccoons to wounded hawks. He didn't flinch when Lena walked in with Benny bundled in a towel-lined carrier. But his eyes did narrow. "Morning, Ms. Moore," he greeted kindly, ushering her into the exam room. "Let's take a look at your mystery kitten." Benny was calm, eerily so, as Lena lifted him from the carrier. He stepped onto the table without resistance, his wide amber eyes scanning the walls, the lights, the tools, as though memorizing every potential exit. Dr. Cooper observed in silence. Lena shifted uneasily. "He doesn't act like a regular kitten. He doesn't meow. He growls. And I think he's growing faster than he should. I've raised rescues before, but he's different." The doctor didn't answer right away. He gently ran a hand along Benny's back, lifted his tiny jaw, examined his ears and paws. Then he stepped back, slowly removed his gloves, and looked at Lena. "He's not a domestic cat," he said softly. "He's a bobcat. Probably around 8 to 10 weeks old. Male. Healthy. Strong." Lena blinked. "No. That can't be. He's so small. He won't stay small. You're lucky he's only showing minor aggression. By 16 weeks, he'll start climbing your curtains like trees and biting anything that moves." His instincts are already engaged. Her heart thundered. I didn't mean to take him. He looked abandoned. He was shaking under my porch. He likely was abandoned. Or orphaned. It happens. Dr. Cooper sat on his stool, voice gentle. But bobcats aren't meant to be pets, Lena. It's not just unsafe, it's illegal to keep one in a private home without a rehabilitation permit. But I named him, she whispered. He sleeps on my blanket. The vet offered a quiet nod. That doesn't make your heart wrong. But it doesn't make him tame either. A silence stretched between them. Benny, as if sensing the tension, let out a low growl and swiped at a tongue depressor on the table. It clattered to the floor. Lena looked at him, really looked. The tufts on his ears. The intensity in his gaze. The wildness in his body language. The truth was right there, crouched on stainless steel. What happens now? She asked. I'll have to report the case to North Carolina Wildlife. But don't worry, they won't penalize you for helping. They'll want to examine him, place him in a rehab program. If he's young enough and not too imprinted, he can be released. Released? The word felt like a punch. It's where he belongs. Trust me. I've seen what happens when wild animals are raised as pets. It doesn't end well, for them or their humans. Lena nodded slowly, tears stinging at the edges of her eyes. She hadn't meant for any of this. She just wanted to help. She just thought he was lost. Dr. Cooper placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Sometimes, the best way to love something wild, is to let it go. Lena would have to make a choice. One that would test her heart, her courage, and her bond with Benny. But before she could let him go, someone else would arrive, someone with a badge, a plan, and a quiet understanding of the wild. A visitor from the wild. Some doors we open out of duty, others because the wild knocks and waits to be heard. 2 days passed like fog, thick, slow, and impossible to see through. Benny remained in the cabin, though Lena no longer let him roam freely. She had moved his bed into the sunroom, cleared out her art supplies, and set up a soft enclosure with climbing posts, chew toys, and a litter box he refused to use. He'd pace along the walls, climb to the windowsill, and watch the woods like something was calling to him from just beyond the trees. The carrier sat ready by the door, though she hadn't been able to bring herself to place him inside it again. She barely slept. Every time her eyes closed, she saw that exam table, Dr. Cooper's kind voice saying, "He's a bobcat." As if the words could be unspoken if she just stayed awake long enough. Then came the knock. It was early morning. Pale mist clung to the earth and birdsong had barely begun to stir the branches. Lena opened the door in a sweater and slippers, eyes still heavy. The woman standing there wore a tan field jacket, olive cargo pants, and a Wildlife Resource Commission patch on her sleeve. Her name tag read, Miranda Blake. "Lena Moore?" she asked. Lena nodded. "You're here for Benny." "Yes," Miranda said. Her voice was calm, clear, and without judgment. Dr. Cooper sent over the file. "Do you mind if I take a look at him?" Lena led her to the sunroom. Benny stood in the middle of the floor, tail twitching, ears up, his golden eyes fixated on the stranger. He didn't run. He didn't growl. He just stared. Miranda crouched low, her movements practiced and slow. "He's beautiful," she said softly. "About 10 weeks, I'd say. Still young enough to rehabilitate." "He's not aggressive," Lena added quickly. "He's just intense. And different." "That's how the wild survives," Miranda replied. "It learns fast." They sat on the floor together, side by side. Benny watched them both, unmoving. Lena finally spoke. "What happens if I give him to you?" "We'll take him to our facility near Brevard. We've got 2 other Bobcat kits around the same age. He'll be evaluated, monitored for behavioral signs of imprinting. If he adjusts well to socialization with his own kind and doesn't show excessive attachment to humans, we'll work toward rewilding. And if he's already too used to people? Miranda hesitated. Then we may consider long-term sanctuary. But we avoid that. A bobcat deserves to be a bobcat. Lena's voice cracked. He sleeps by my pillow. Miranda placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I know. I've seen it more times than I can count. You wanted to help. And you did. You saved his life. But I can't be his future, Lena whispered. No, Miranda said. You were his moment. A moment of safety, warmth, survival. Now he needs a future only the forest can give. Lena felt a tear slip down her cheek. Benny still hadn't moved. His tiny body looked so fragile now, and yet, he held himself like a prince. You'll be good to him? She asked. I swear it. Lena nodded. Miranda stood and gently placed the carrier on the floor. She didn't reach for him. Instead, she opened the door and sat back down. Benny blinked, sniffed the air, and padded forward. He walked inside the crate without a sound. Not out of fear. Not because he was forced. It was as if he knew. The house had given him what it could. Now it was time. Lena couldn't speak. She just knelt beside the crate, slipped her hand through the bars, and whispered, Your name is Benny. And you mattered to me. Benny licked her fingers once, then turned away and curled into the towel. As Miranda carried him down the porch steps, Lena stood at the doorway, arms crossed against her chest, watching until the car disappeared around the bend. The sun rose behind the trees. And for the first time in days, Jasper returned to her side. Letting go was supposed to be the end. But the forest had more to give. And soon, Benny's absence would become its own kind of presence, one that whispered through pine needles and called her back to something wilder than comfort, the truth. Lost in the wild. The hardest goodbyes are the ones that return, unexpected and undone. The storm rolled in suddenly. Dark clouds smothered the sun, and thunder cracked through the mountains like the earth was breaking open. Wind lashed against the cabin windows, and the trees that usually stood still and silent now thrashed like they were trying to run. Lena was in the middle of making tea when she heard the noise, the unmistakable sound of wood clattering on wood, followed by the panicked scratching of claws. She turned toward the sunroom and froze. The door was open. The latch on the lower screen must have come loose in the wind. She rushed forward just in time to see the shredded towel Benny used to sleep on lying limp across the floor. The room was empty. The crate was tipped on its side. Benny was gone. No, Lena breathed. No, no, no. She didn't wait. She didn't think. She grabbed her boots, a flashlight, and the parka from the wall hook. Jasper meowed once from the sofa, but she was already out the door. The forest was darker than it should have been, for 4 p.m. Rain had begun to fall, slow, heavy drops that hit her shoulders like cold stones. The wind was carrying pine needles sideways, and leaves whipped across the dirt trail that wound behind her house. Benny, she called. Benny, it's me. Only the wind answered. She climbed through the brush, heart pounding, mud soaking into her jeans. Branches clawed at her arms and face as she moved deeper into the woods. Her flashlight cut weak yellow beams through the gloom, but it couldn't reach far. She called again. And again. Then she heard it. A yelp, high, sharp, and raw. She pivoted, turning toward the sound, feet slipping in wet leaves. Her flashlight caught movement ahead. Not far. Maybe 50 yards. She ran. Branches snapped underfoot. Her breath came in harsh bursts. And then she saw them, 2 forms in the clearing. Benny. And a coyote. The wild dog had Benny pinned, teeth bared, body low and tense. Benny was snarling, but his frame was still too small to match the predator's strength. "Hey!" Lena screamed, picking up the nearest rock and hurling it with everything she had. It struck a tree near the coyote, which jerked back, startled. Another rock. Another scream. The animal snarled, hesitated, and then bolted into the undergrowth. Lena dropped to her knees, crawling to Benny, who was panting hard, one paw streaked with blood. "It's okay," she said, voice cracking. "I've got you." But Benny didn't move toward her. He looked at her, and ran. Disappeared into the woods, limping but fast. Gone in seconds. Lena sat back on her heels, soaked and shaking. Rain poured down her face, mingling with tears she didn't realize she'd let fall. He had survived. But not because of her. Because the wild inside him had chosen itself. Transition. By the time Lena returned to the cabin, her heart was both shattered and strangely whole. She didn't know it then, but this wouldn't be the last time Benny touched her life, because some bonds don't vanish in the dark. They wait for the light. Between two worlds. Some connections don't need words, only the silence between two heartbeats. The cabin was quiet again, but it wasn't the comforting quiet Lena once knew. It was the kind that presses into your skin, settling in your bones. She sat by the window for hours, wrapped in a wool blanket, watching the trees drip rain onto the mossy earth. Benny was gone. But he wasn't lost. He had chosen the forest. She tried to hold on to that thought as she gently cleaned the small scrape on her arm from a branch and reheated the tea that had gone cold before she ever tasted it. Jasper curled beside her now, as if sensing the shift in the house. His tail flicked across her wrist, but even his purring was subdued. For the next week, she did what she always did. She drew, she worked, she listened to music and brewed tea. But something inside her had changed. She left food out near the edge of the forest, not because she expected Benny to return, but because it felt right. A gesture of love, not ownership. One morning, the turkey pieces were gone. No tracks, no sign. The next day, the same. On the third morning, she found something. A small toy. A mouse. Torn and chewed but unmistakably the one Benny had stolen from Jasper during his first stormy night in the cabin. It was placed gently, precisely, on the flat rock near the woodshed. Like an offering. Like a memory returned. Lena held it in both hands, heart racing. He had come back. Even for a moment. And he remembered. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and bathed the woods in gold, she stepped outside. The air was warm, the wind soft. And then she saw him. 50 feet beyond the edge of the trees. Not close. Not far. He stood taller now, stronger. His coat was thick, legs longer, posture proud. A wild thing, fully grown. Benny. He didn't move. Neither did she. They just watched each other. The same way they had, the first night. Two creatures on different paths, that had once, for a time, crossed. Lena raised a hand, slowly, fingers trembling. He blinked. Then, without a sound, Benny turned. Slipped between the pines. Gone. But this time, there was no sorrow in his leaving. Only peace. Because she finally understood, she hadn't lost him. She had simply loved him well enough to let him be who he was born to be. The next chapter of Lena's life wasn't about forgetting, it was about remembering in a new way. Through sketches. Through story. Through every rustle in the trees that reminded her, the wild had once come to rest its head in her home. A glimpse in the snow. Some goodbyes aren't forever, they just return in a different form. Winter came slowly to Asheville that year, brushing frost over windows like whispered memories. The forest grew quieter with each passing day. Trees stood bare, and the sky turned the pale gray of unfinished sketches. Lena had stopped leaving food out by then. It no longer felt necessary. But every time snow blanketed the earth, she'd scan it for prints. Some mornings, she saw them, faint, careful paw marks crossing the frozen path behind her woodshed. Big. Too big for Jasper. Too round for a dog. She never chased them. Instead, she'd smile, place another log on the fire, and start to draw. The book came together faster than she thought it would. It started as a sketch on a napkin, a tiny spotted kitten with tufted ears curled in a blanket. Then came the story, flowing out of her like breath she'd been holding for too long. She titled it The Bobcat Beneath the Porch. Lena used her own memories to guide each page, her first sight of Benny under the porch swing, the way he'd curled beside her cup of tea, the moment he disappeared into the forest mist. But the last illustration? That was the one that mattered. It showed a grown bobcat at the edge of the woods, standing tall and regal, golden eyes watching a woman standing in the doorway of a cabin. The space between them was wide. But the connection was unmistakable. The publishers loved it. The story went viral online within days. Readers across the country wrote in to say they'd cried, that they never thought of wild animals the same way again. Some even shared their own stories of animal encounters, of rescues that changed them. Lena read every single one. One letter, from a little girl in Vermont, simply said, "I didn't know bobcats could love back. Thank you." Jasper became somewhat of a celebrity himself, often photographed lounging near Lena's art table, watching her work like a grumpy editor. But Lena never claimed to be Benny's owner. In every interview, every podcast, she said the same thing. "I was just a safe place he passed through. That was all he needed." Still, some nights, especially when the wind swept down the mountain in long, cold sighs, she'd step onto the porch, wrap herself in a blanket, and listen. And sometimes, just sometimes, she swore she heard a soft chirp in the distance. Not a meow. Not a howl. But something in between. Something wild. And while the world celebrated the story she shared, Lena knew the final chapter hadn't been drawn yet. Because the forest held more than memories, it held the pulse of something living, something watching, and something that, one day, might return again. Where the wild things remember. Love doesn't end at the edge of the woods, it waits there, in stillness. Spring returned like a breath held too long. The snow melted from the forest floor, revealing moss-covered stones and new shoots pressing up through the thawing earth. Birds returned to their nests, and the cabin once again buzzed with the soft hum of bees and the rustling of new leaves. Lena stood barefoot on the back porch one morning, coffee warming her hands. Jasper sat at her feet, tail flicking lazily, eyes squinting at the rising sun. There was a peace to the morning that felt earned, not forced, but grown from something that had hurt and healed in equal measure. Benny hadn't come back. Not truly. But in some way, he never left. Every time Lena spotted a shadow move between the trees or heard a rustle just beyond the tree line, her heart fluttered, not with hope, but with recognition. As if the forest was winking at her, whispering, "He's still here." And that was enough. Inside the cabin, framed prints from the bobcat beneath the porch hung on the walls, but her favorite image was not part of the book. It sat alone above her desk, a charcoal sketch of Benny, full-grown, looking over his shoulder from the woods. His eyes met the viewers with quiet knowing. Wild, beautiful, and free. Readers kept asking if there would be a sequel. But Lena didn't have a new story yet. Until the letter came. It was postmarked from a wildlife rehabilitation center near Brevard, the same one where Officer Miranda Blake had taken Benny nearly a year ago. Inside was a note. Handwritten. "Hi Lena. I thought you might like to know. We released 3 bobcats back into the wild this spring. 2 females. 1 male. The male paused at the edge of the trees. Looked back toward the gate. Then ran. He had a faint scar on his left paw. We think it was your Benny. He remembered the world that raised him. But he chose the one he was born for. Thought you'd want to know. Miranda. Lena read the letter 3 times. Then folded it carefully, placed it in her sketchbook, and stepped outside. The wind danced through the branches. The trees whispered secrets in the language of leaves. And somewhere deep in those woods, a shape might have moved. Or maybe not. She smiled. Not all stories need an ending. Some just become part of the land. And so, the woman and the bobcat parted ways, but never truly let go. Because love, in its truest form, asks for nothing in return. It simply waits, watches, and walks quietly beside us, even from the shadows. Sometimes, the greatest acts of love are the ones that ask us to let go. Lena didn't set out to rescue a wild animal, she simply followed her heart. In doing so, she discovered a deeper truth: not everything we hold on to is meant to stay. Some bonds exist to awaken something inside us, to change the way we see the world and ourselves. In Benny, she found not a pet, but a wild soul that reminded her how to listen, to respect, and to trust. His presence transformed her home. His departure transformed her spirit. And perhaps the lesson is this: we don't need to keep something close to keep it forever. What we nurture with love will find its way, whether that's in the woods, in memory, or in the quiet strength of letting go. If stories like these move you, challenge you, or make you see animals a little differently, we'd love to have you as part of the Paw Prints and Stories family. Here's your challenge. Look around your world today. What are you holding on to that may be ready to return to the wild? What would it mean to love, without possession? That's the story we invite you to live next.